Hi, I'm here to talk about my case study for EDL 852, Module 12, our last module for this class. So first we're going to summarize the case. So we have Lightville Community School District. It serves two rural communities with over 60% of the residents living on farms. They have two schools in total. There's an elementary school that houses grades K through 6, a junior high, senior high, housing grades 7 through 12. Both are located on 65 acres, which is 2 miles south of the town of Lightville. Next, we're going to talk about their new middle school. The enrollment of the school district has increased over the years, going from 758 to just over 1,200. Due to population increase, the school and community decided to open a new separate middle school building. They will be building a new school building a new school was publicly debated for about 4 months. The school board voted 4-1, and the community approved by a slight margin of 53% to 47%. The new middle school would house 6th through 8th grades and was designed to house up to 450 students. It would take approximately 18 months to complete. Next, let's talk about the superintendent, Joe Rawlings. The superintendent recommended and the board approved to hire a new principal for the middle school 12 months prior to the building being opened. This would allow the new principal to have input on staffing and designing the curriculum. The superintendent, Joe Rawlings, received many applications, and Susan Potter was eventually hired as a new middle school principal. So now let's talk about Susan Potter, the new middle school principal. She is an experienced teacher and was a middle school assistant principal in a suburban school district. She began her employment with Lightville officially on August 1st, about 12 months prior to the opening of the new middle school. She was asked by the superintendent to make staffing decisions, organize the school's programs, and collaborate with architects and construction managers. The staffing for her was easy to complete. Many teachers already employed with the district applied to fill the vacancies. Because so many faculty members were already employed in the district, Ms. Potter involved them in the organizational decisions of the new middle school. So now we're going to talk about the advisory committee. Ms. Potter created an advisory committee after input from the superintendent, Rawlings, and the school board members. Ms. Potter called the group the Vision and Planning Committee. The committee consisted of 4 teachers from different subject areas and 4 parent volunteers. At the first meeting, Ms. Potter stated she would prefer to be a committee, not be the committee chair, and just wanted to be on the committee. She presented a set of guidelines on how the committee should function. It should operate democratically, to work on the premise of consensus. The first task would be to develop a vision statement. The vision statement would reflect the collective values and beliefs of the committee and other stakeholders. All stakeholders would be given an opportunity to suggest elements for the vision statement and a philosophy statement and react to the elements proposed by the others. The committee agreed with the guidelines but disagreed with Ms. Potter not being the chairperson. They felt she was the most qualified person. Ms. Potter again reiterated that she wanted to share leadership responsibilities with the teachers and the community members, and felt not being the chairperson was symbolically important. The committee agreed and voted another member to be the chairperson, Helen Burke. So now let's talk about Helen Burke. She is an English and social studies teacher. Her brother, a farmer, is on the school board. He was the only farmer on the school board who was in favor of the new middle school. She campaigned to build a new middle school. She agreed to be the committee chairperson only after Mrs. Potter agreed to help her perform the role. She was not convinced the committee needed to be the ones to create the vision statement or philosophy statement. She felt the vision statement should be created by the principal Potter. She also was willing to let Mrs. Potter know how her brother, the school board member, feels about Mrs. Potter and her skills. She explained her position at the next committee meeting and went as far as recounting the discussion she had with Principal Potter. Principal Potter tried to explain herself and the need for the philosophy and vision statements to be created collaboratively. Helen asked the committee if anyone agreed with Principal Potter's views. Only one parent said she did agree. The others were silent. Helen then pressed her preference that Susan draft, or Principal Potter draft, a philosophy statement and present it to the committee for approval, and the same would happen for the vision statement. A motion was made to formalize Helen's preference. It was voted to support the motion by 7 members, 1 abstained, and Susan, of course, voted against it. After the meeting was over, Helen stated she hoped Helen was not too discouraged. She hoped Susan was not too discouraged, but the committee expected her to lead. She was not sure they would have a philosophy and vision statement embraced by all, but she was sure Susan would be able to create a philosophy and vision statement that would be embraced by all the stakeholders. Helen left, and Susan was left with what to do now. So now we have to report the legal or the ethical issues. I'm not really sure there's any ethical concerns with this particular case study. May not exactly be as ethical in the fact that they didn't necessarily follow the guidelines in the very first committee they had. So maybe there's an issue there. And the other question is the school board master policy. Is there any policy stating about committees, how they are formed, how they are governed, and who the chairpeople should be? So let's synthesize what's happened. The principal for the new middle school, Susan Potter, created an advisory committee to help with decision making and create both a philosophy and vision statement. However, the committee not being comfortable with this, voted for Mrs. Potter to complete each and submit both for the committee's approval. So let's talk about who's involved. First, we have the principal, or myself, according to the instructions of our case study. She's a new principal for the middle school building. She was hired before the building was completed to help with the setup for the new building. She is a veteran teacher and was an assistant principal at a suburban school district, but her years of experience and age are unknown. The superintendent, Joe Rawlings, he's definitely in favor of the new middle school. He recommended that the board retain an architectural firm to study the space problems for the district before they decided to build a new middle school. He recommended that the board hire a new principal for the completion of the new middle school building to aid with the setting up of all the programs. He did aid Mrs. Potter with creating the advisory committee. His years with the district and years of experience and age are unknown. Next, we have the advisory committee. It was created by Principal Potter, the superintendent, and the school board. It consists of 9 members, including Principal Potter, 4 teachers, Helen Burke and Dan Kelby, who is a PE teacher, and 4 community members or parent volunteers. Helen Burke is the chairperson because Mrs. Potter did not want to be the chairperson. Next, we have teacher Helen Burke. She is an English and social studies teacher. Her brother is on the school board and was the only farmer on the school board who was for the new middle school. She is the advisory committee chairperson because Mrs. Potter did not want to be. She is more than willing to step into that role. She thinks that it's Mrs. Potter's responsibility to create the philosophy and vision statements of the new middle school, not the advisory committee. So let's talk about where this happened. We have the town of Lightville itself. It's a rural and agricultural community with a growing population. It's located 10 miles from a major city in an adjoining county. It has attracted new residents due to its rural environment, low land costs, and new schools. There is an increase of families with school-age children. The new families are very active in the community, and many promoted a new middle school building. The size and population of Lightville is unknown. The Lightville Community School District. It's located in a rural community of Lightville, obviously. Its enrollment has increased steadily for a number of years. It has attracted many families with young school-age children. The school district and community voted to build a new school building, middle school building, on the same acreage as the existing school buildings. The number of staff members employed by the school district is unknown. It is also unknown if there will be an assistant principal for the new middle school or how many staff members it will have. Next, we have the conference room, the place of the advisory committee. I'm assuming it's in a conference room. That's really never stated in the case study. I don't know. It could be in the administration building. There may be room there for that. And then the principal's office. They did talk about Susan Potter having her own office or room. I'm assuming that is at the administration building, but that's not really unknown. So what programs are involved? Well, first we have the new middle school building, the creation of philosophy and vision statements, so the staff's involvement is imperative. The advisory committee was created by the principal, superintendent, and the school board. And the administrative staff. Obviously, we have the superintendent, Joe Rawlings, the principal of the new middle school building, Susan Potter. But one question I want to know is, will there be an assistant principal for the new middle school? Because it is rated up to 450 students, which is not really a small population. So let's review and analyze. Let's talk about the stakeholders. We have the town of Lightville. It's a rural agricultural community located 10 miles from a larger city. Their population is growing. It has 2 schools, one being an elementary school, which is K through 6, and another junior senior high school, which is 7 through 8. A new middle school is being built, which will hold the grades 6 through 8. And the schools are in the, I would assume, are the hub and the activity of the town, as it is in many small towns. The advisory committee. Principal Potter seems to have lost or has given up her authority over this committee. It may be tricky to try to assert herself without alienating everyone on the committee. The committee is necessary to create a philosophy and a vision statement befitting the school. The committee needs to collaboratively design a philosophy and vision statement that reflects a core set of values and priorities and aid in the implementation and communicating of these statements. Next, we have the parent volunteers. Parents are willing to volunteer at the school. Many new families of school-aged children have moved to Lightville, and those families are very much involved in the schools. The school board. It's an elected school board of 5 members from the community. 2 of the 5 members of the school board are new to the community and have school-aged children. Helen Burke's brother is on the school board and is the only farmer on the school board who believed in the new middle school was necessary. Next, we have the superintendent, Joe Rawlings. Superintendent Rawlings spearheaded the effort to build a new middle school. He is very involved in the district, and he was very helpful to Mrs. Potter about aiding and in the setting up of the advisory committee. Next, we have the staff of the new middle school. It's unknown how large the staff will be. Each member will be affected by the philosophy and vision statements of their building. The philosophy and vision statement should be the driving force of the building. All decisions should be made with those 2 statements in mind to ensure that the staff is moving in the right direction. So we have the staff of Lightville Community District. It's unknown how many people are employed with the district, but with most small rural agricultural communities, the school district is a major employer. So each staff member has a vested interest in the success of the new middle school. So what is the role and importance of the school's philosophy, vision, and mission statements? So mission statements act as a North Star, which provide the direction of the school. Vision statements provide the goal or the designation to be reached. The mission statement provides a clear and effective guide for making decisions. The vision statements ensure that all decisions are properly aligned with the school hopes to achieve. So how to collaboratively design a school mission and vision statement? First, you need to gather the stakeholders, put together a small group that reflects your stakeholders, and get them brainstorming, which Principal Potter did attempt to do. Look at your school. Your school has challenges and strengths. It's full of data that can help you. Gather your school's data and identify the top issues, strengths, and opportunities for growth. Look at the future. Ask what steps the school community needs to take to achieve the vision. For example, what's already in place to help us move forward? How do we envision our school growing? What needs to be changed? What changes do we need to see happening in the future? Write your first draft. Be sure to avoid cliches. Be specific and authentic. When you're satisfied, bring it back to the larger group of stakeholders who you have brainstormed with. It may be difficult or may require some compromise. In the end, you should have a mission and vision statement that reflects the values and priorities of as many stakeholders as possible. And lastly, give the school mission and vision statement to the community. Present your statements to the whole community. This could be through a meeting with district leaders, a parent evening, or through the school newsletter. Invite community members to raise any serious concerns with you. Gather feedback from the community and make sure the concerns of the majority of the stakeholders have been met. The vision and mission statements complement each other, and stakeholders agree the vision and mission statements are inaccurate representatives of current and future school growth. So now let's talk about the options that I thought about to help Mrs. Potter or myself with this current predicament. The first option that I thought about is Mrs. Potter or myself could follow the committee's decision and complete the philosophy and vision statement on my own or on her own. The pros are it does keep the peace and it's probably easier. However, the cons are the statements will reflect Mrs. Potter's ideas only. A committee is also dictating how Mrs. Potter does her job, which is not a good position to be in as a principal. It may damage her reputation as a school leader once people realize that another committee is dictating how she's going to run her school building, and the advisory committee will not function as it was planned. So I have the next option 2, which is what I always call or sometimes call the extreme option. So let's talk about that. First, we have Helen Burke. In this extreme option, I would have a harsh conversation with her and how she was wrong to go against myself in the meeting. I would speak harshly to her at the next advisory committee meeting, calling into question her competency as a teacher and her knowledge of creating philosophy and vision statements. I would demand that she step down as a chairperson or remove her from the advisory committee altogether. Very harsh ideas. Next, we talk about the advisory committee. I would speak harshly to them collectively and not individually, which might let someone explain their concerns, but when they were too uncomfortable to speak up at the time. I would remove Helen Burke as a chairperson and take the position myself. Explain again the guidelines from previous committee meeting, forcing them to follow them, and require each to come up with a philosophy and vision statement before the next meeting. And the superintendent, I would just completely leave him out of the conversation altogether. So the pros of this very extreme option is obviously it does reestablish my authority. I will not be required to follow any directives from the advisory committee again. However, there are many more cons. It damages the relationship with the advisory committee. It damages my relationships with many community members after they find out that I was so harsh with the committee itself. And it damages my reputation as a school leader. And it also damages the school's reputation to actually function in a manner that makes sure that people's well-being is taken care of and thought about. So now we're going to discuss my option. So first, let's talk about the superintendent. First, I would need to have a frank discussion with Mr. Rawlings about my concerns with the advisory committee and take notes on his suggestions and try to follow those suggestions. And then, of course, remain in contact with him during the time to make sure that I was on the right path. Next, let's talk about Helen Burke. I, of course, would need to have a discussion with her as soon as possible in my office, thanking her for all of her work she has done with the advisory committee. She's a valued, and make sure I state that she's a valued member of the new staff and district. Discuss my unhappiness about how things went with the last meeting. Stand firm, but not harsh. She may be defensive. Try to impress on her that I am the principal and I have the authority to require her help. And because that is really what needs to happen. I need to work with Helen Burke collaboratively to make sure that this community or this committee is going to function. I would discuss how I would like to work together as the advisory committee chairperson. My suggestion is I would do some additional training with the committee about guidelines for the meetings first, especially. Second, we would need to gather some information for the committee about the school district and the community to be able to create a vision and philosophy statement. What are the strengths and the weaknesses of the committee and the school district? Where do they see the school district going? What is most important? We could look at other school districts' philosophy and vision statements and circle what works or applies to our new middle school. Helen could work on this. She could use surveys to gather the information. During this time, I will be doing some trainings with the advisory committee about the importance of the guidelines of the committee and the philosophy and vision statements. Third, she and I would complete the vision and philosophy statements. Fourth, we would take the statements back to the committee for approval or changes. And last, it would be imperative for her to understand that we need to work together. If she is unwilling, I may have to insist that I become the chairperson for the advisory committee. So let's talk about the advisory committee itself. I'm going to have a frank discussion with the advisory committee. Helen Burke and I will be acting as the chairperson. I will be focused on trainings for the committee and dealing with the guidelines for the committee and how it functions. Also trainings on the importance, role, and creation of philosophy and vision statements. We will be working together on these trainings for a number of sessions. And I must reiterate how important it is to me that we work together to create these statements to determine our school's growth and future. I will need their help as I am new to the community and will need the information they can provide to enable us to create statements that are clear and accurate for our school. So let's talk about the pros of my particular choice. It does maintain the relationships, hopefully with all involved. It maintains our reputation, my reputation and others' reputation. The committee will be back on track and it does reclaim my authority. The con is Helen may decide to leave the committee. I hope not. I hope that would be something that I could avoid and she and I could try to work together. So what is it? How do I implement this plan? Number one, I need to check board policies on committees. They may have ones that exist on who those chair peoples need to be. I need to have a discussion with the superintendent, Joe Rawlings. I need to keep Mr. Rawlings abreast of the progress via phone calls or emails. I need to speak with Helen Burke and set up future meetings with her. The meetings I need to have have meetings with each of the teachers on the committee individually and each of the parent volunteers individually. Meet with the advisory committee and have an open discussion about guidelines, trainings, and philosophy and vision statements. One thing that did concern me a little bit or concerned me greatly in this case study that might have a tendency to be glossed over is the guidelines. Is that Mrs. Potter or myself came in and set down guidelines on how the committee was going to run, and she wanted it to be done democratically and run on a consensus basis. However, before the meeting was over, that's not what happened. They voted in a parliamentary procedure. Parliamentary procedure runs on a majority rule, and that's not what consensus is. Consensus is everybody agreeing with a particular outcome or idea or strategy that you're going to try that works for everybody. That's what consensus is. Parliamentary procedure is based on majority, and that's not exactly what was happening there. So it kind of fell apart on her rather quickly. So we would have to have a series of advisory committee meetings for those trainings on guidelines and what those need to look like, trainings on philosophy and vision statements, and there may need to be current additional trainings. So hopefully that would result in both a vision and philosophy statement, and then we would publish the vision and philosophy statement on the website and other social media platforms. All right, so that is the end of my presentation. So thank you very much for listening and taking your time, and good luck in your future.